What's up, fight fans? I've got a shorter video today. I just thought I'd air some grievances I had with the current meta UFC rankings, and specifically how it pertains to kind of the promotional side of things, and also what I just think the rankings should mean, and what the meta rankings kind of take away from that. So let's just get straight into it. Why were the old rankings good, right? It's a good kind of question, and I think it is best exemplified with the old featherweight rankings versus the new ones, or specifically the media rankings. And what we've got going on here is, the top six, top seven, it's pretty similar, but then the names start to kind of change up, right? So for instance, in the meta rankings, we've got Pat Sabatini at number 7. Now, I can recognize that Pat Sabatini is, he's a high-level UFC fighter, right? And he wins fights consistently. But who has he beat? No one who was ranked number 7, I can tell you that. His last win was Chepe Mariscal. Pretty boring fight. Mariscal is an unranked guy. He's always been an unranked guy. Who did he beat before that? William Gomez. William Gomez has always been an unranked guy. So, people are getting put in the rankings for unranked wins. And in Sabatini's case, they're not even like good finishers. He hasn't demonstrated that he can beat high-level opponents. And, against the highest level opponent he faced, wasn't high level at the time, but when he went against Diego Lopez, it was a wash, right? He got bodied. And I'm kind of looking at the old rankings, right? We've got Yair Rodriguez at 5, and in the new rankings, he's been booted out. Now, I understand why he was booted out, and I do think that there is a problem with rank squatting. But removing Yair Rodriguez from the rankings entirely, I can't really get down with that. He's a top name in the featherweight division, and, in order for top contenders to prove themselves, they need to beat someone like that. And sure, he doesn't give them the opportunity to fight him, but I still think there's something to be said about actually beating the big names in your division, as opposed to climbing up the rankings because you're styling on unranked guys. Okay? Excuse the dog in the background. That's that's my friend. But we've also got Brian Ortega in these rankings, right? And he's been booted out of the new rankings. Now, do I think he beats the guys under him in these rankings? No. But can I respect the fact that, he was once highly ranked and is now kind of a stepping stone for these new contenders, sure. But I don't think that, completely removing him is entirely fair. Now, yes, the old rankings had their problems. Yair Rodriguez, one of his recent losses is to Brian Ortega, right? He's got an injury win over Ortega, and then most recently, a submission loss. Now, do I think that means Yair Rodriguez should be below Ortega at this point? Maybe not, because Ortega has lost a fair bit since then. But, the old rankings weren't perfect, but I think they're better than the new ones. So, yeah, we'll move on from that one. Also, Nathaniel Wood. Okay, he consistently gets good wins, I agree. Majority decisions, first off. And secondly, he hasn't beaten the big names. I know it's not his fault. I know he doesn't get offered the big names. But regardless, why is he number 9 in the world when he hasn't even beat a number 15? Well, I mean, I'm sure he has beat... Well, yeah, no, okay, he beat... But here's the thing, that the Meta AI rankings, he beat number 14 here, but in the media rankings, he hasn't fought these, guys higher up in the rankings. I also think that the Meta AI rankings kind of fuck with the promotion of fights, right? So, for instance, Yair Rodriguez versus John Silver. That is a fight that is booked for UFC Noche. This would be Silver's, I guess you could say, it would be his biggest win. It would be over a former title challenger. It'd be over the number 5 ranked guy in the world. And they use the media rankings for this one because the media rankings are the ones that have Yair highly ranked. I don't know, if John Silver was fighting, let's say, Pat Sabatini, they'd use the meta rankings. Likewise, a fight that happened a while ago, but I still think is pretty important to bring up, Rafael Fiziev versus Manuel Torres. This was supposed to be Torres' coming out party, right? He was supposed to beat a guy in the rankings, get ranked himself, and then go on become a contender from there. Now, obviously, that is not what happened. He got knocked out. However, this was the first main event that happened after the meta AI rankings were implemented. And the meta rankings have cheapened some of these matchups because upon their introduction, Fiziev became unranked and Torres became number 14. And all of a sudden, it was Fiziev fighting for a spot in the rankings. I just don't see how that makes sense. The meta rankings, the UFC is basically like, it's a case-to-case thing. If they make the fights look good, they'll use the meta rankings. And if the meta rankings don't make sense, which they usually don't, we can see, even in the new event, they've gone with the media rankings. If the meta rankings don't make sense, they'll just use the media rankings to promote the fight instead. So that's something, in that sense, what do the meta rankings actually mean? Nothing. They're redundant. They're a tool used to market fights. I get that it's kind of like a meritocracy. Does this guy get finished? Does this guy get finishes? Does that guy get finishes? But I think, Uros Medic, right? He is a guy in the UFC who he's got some losses. He got knocked out by Punahele Soriano, who is still fighting unranked opponents, by the way, as is Miktabek Orobai, another guy who beat Uros Medic. In that fight, he kind of showed that he was a level above, and yet Uros Medic is the one getting these opportunities, and he's the one who's in the rankings. Now, first off, how did he get into those rankings? Well, he beat Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal was 1-4 in his past 5, and that one win was an injury over Rafael Dos Anjos, which is hardly a win, okay? But it was a good performance over, a guy who had some tough fights with top contenders, so I get becoming ranked because of that. It makes sense. What doesn't make sense is how come in the meta rankings, Medic is 10, he's above the second greatest welterweight of all time. He's above Michael Venom Page, someone who I'm sure would beat him, as is Yaroslav Amosov. Alright? Both these guys, I think, are more skillful than Medic, yet Medic has been catapulted above them because he put on a flashy performance. Uros Medic could get a title shot if they gave him the right matchups and he had the right kind of performances. And I know that's like, I know that's a statement that's true of many guys. But it still stands that I don't think he's beat a top contender. He beat Daniel Rodriguez. As we can see, Rodriguez is 15 in the media rankings and Medic is 12. These are both more reasonable placements, in my opinion. Because Medic, he beat a ranked guy. He beat Daniel Rodriguez. And he beat him impressively. I get the jump up. But, I think it is also fair that Malott is below him. I think it is also fair that MVP is below him. Just because, MVP's been somewhat inactive. I mean, not inactive, but you know, he hasn't been fighting ranked guys that much, which is not his fault again. But I think this kind of direct comparison of spots 10 through 15, media and meta rankings, also shows that this is a, you know, a promotional thing. Because how come Kevin Holland has replaced Daniel Rodriguez in the rankings? Daniel Rodriguez beat him recently. I know Kevin Holland's looking for another fight. He was supposed to fight Jacoby Smith. But yeah, you know, Kevin Holland is a big name. Rodriguez lost, and now they've put Holland back in the rankings. You know, I think the whole performance-based aspect of the meta rankings is to kind of just catapult or put people who have name value back in when somebody loses. And, you know, it's like, fair enough, you know, they lost. But Holland, we've seen repeatedly, he loses the ranked fights. He is not a ranked level fighter. And, you know, just based on results, yet he still manages to weasel his way in here. And it's not him personally, but you can see what I'm getting at. Oh, shit. Spoiler. I think the whole kind of your last fight determines how they perceive you thing. I don't know if that's the way to do the rankings. And I suppose a good example of that is Steve Erceg getting booted out of the meta rankings after getting knocked out. Now, yes, he lost. Yes, it was bad. But he was ranked number 10. He was, you know, he was a top 10 opponent. He wasn't, you know, clinging on to the rankings in like spot 14, spot 13, spot 15. He was number 10. So, you know, in the media rankings, he gets jumped down a little bit. Yes, it's fair enough. The guy who beat him gets his ranking. But meanwhile, in the meta rankings, he just gets completely, like, you know, punted out of the rankings. And Kevin Borjas, who was 2-4 in the UFC, is still there. It's just like, you know, I think the whole performance-driven aspect of the meta rankings is making these calls preemptively. I disagree with them. And, you know, as a promotional tool, it's still fucking up. It's still fucking up because the fights that are supposed to be, you know, passing up the torch or big moment opportunities where someone who, you know, they haven't had a big fight yet, they're finally getting that big name. Well, if that big name gets kicked out of the rankings the second that they lose that fight, then all of a sudden it cheapens that win. And, you know, if that person gets beaten in the next fight, suddenly they're out of the rankings. What did we do all that for? So anyway, that's just some quick thoughts I had on the rankings. I know, you know, the rankings have been out for a little bit, but recently, you know, especially with Uros Medic's win, I just think they've become a little egregious. I'd like to close the video with a poem. I miss the old rankings, straight from the go rankings. Chop up the soul rankings, set on his goals rankings. I hate the new rankings, the bad mood rankings, the meta AI rankings, spaz in the news rankings. I miss the sweet rankings, the ones with Yair rankings. I gotta say, at that time I'd like to meet the rankings. See, I invented rankings. There wasn't any rankings. And now I look and there's so many rankings. I used to love rankings. I even had the pink polo. I thought I was ranking. What if rankings made a song about rankings? Could I miss Steve Erceg in the flyweight rankings? That's all it was, rankings. We still love rankings, and I love you like rankings. Love rankings. Alright, peace.